Hello guys, this is your friend and we are back with a new fanfic. Which is, what if Naruto died as a hero, and reborn as an immortal god of darkness who crushed the shinobi world? Crossed Swords Fire, Part 1. And if you enjoy this fanfic then please press the like button and subscribe to my channel for more fanfic like this. And now let's start the fanfic. High within the mountain range known for the sheer cold and containing the highest point on Earth, Mount Everest, a cavern could be found deep within with only some candles for lighting and an array of artwork, weapons, maps, documents, books, and a large training area along with a small bed and table contained within. Within the training area, there were 6 individuals that were all male and looked exactly the same. They had black hair with red tips that was spiked out slightly and wild. A black tank top with a crimson flak jacket over it, crimson pants with black stripes, combat boots with realistic flames across the bottom, and fingerless black gloves with a crimson leaf emblem on the backs. If one looked closely, they could see 5 colors: blue, red, black, silver, and white, spiraled around the right arms of the individuals that went from their shoulders to under the gloves. Currently, 5 of them were surrounding the 6th that had the addition of a black blindfold over his eyes. On a silent K, the 5 launched at the one, who bent back to dodge a kick before twisting and catching a thrown punch from another of the 5. The one then judo tossed the puncher into another of the 5, causing them to poof away in smoke before he ducked down and mule kicked an attacker, knocking him back. The one then did a handstand and twisted around, swinging his legs like a helicopter spin, knocking the other 2 away. He then leapt into the air and slammed his foot into one in a powerful axe kick that caused it to burst into smoke before he caught a kick to his head before slamming the attacker on the ground, causing it to poof before the one squared off with the last. The last one circled the one slowly before jumping and doing a drop kick, which was dodged by the one when he contorted out of the way and did a spinning axe kick, breaking the last and causing it to pop in smoke. The one stood straight before turning his head towards the bed as he heard clapping and he frowned. "What do you want, Yami?" the male asked as he removed the blindfold, showing his pure crimson eyes that seemed to glow in the darkness, and looked at the person on his bed. Said person was a woman with pure black hair that was tied in a braid that ended just above her, black eyes that held both malice and mischief, a rather gorgeous body that made her look every bit of a goddess that she was, with F-cup, a heart-shaped, wide hips, slender legs, heart-shaped face, and full black painted lips. To finish her look, she wore a black gown that flowed around her body, showing it off since her entire cleavage was shown due to her dress going over her shoulders and covered her but left her midriff and middle of her chest bare as it came back together just above her crotch, and had a slit down the skirt part showing off her right leg, and due to her sitting he could see her black heels and stockings as well. Her ears she had 2 black studs for earrings and a black bangle on her right wrist, and seemed to be amused at the man. "Oh, come now Naruto-kun, can't I stop by and say hi every millennia or so?" she asked before she was pinned to the wall with Naruto's hand on her throat and black tendrils sprouting from his back ready to skewer her. "Do not push me, Yami. Your bastard of a brother destroyed everyone I ever cared about just because I decided not to be his errand boy, and then retaliated when he sent his bitch of an angel after me. I have been alone in this world for millennia because your brother doesn't like being told no, and you and your bastard husband didn't do a damn thing to stop him, so do not with me right now," he stated before shouting angrily, with his voice becoming darker at the end. Yami was impassive on the outside, but on the inside she was impressed since his strength and power had come along so much since he was a boy, but then again it shouldn't be that surprising considering how long he had been around and had nothing to do but train and grow his powers. Shaking those thoughts away, she smiled at Naruto. "That's true, but some things have changed. She stated, making Naruto raise an eyebrow but otherwise did not move. Kami's power has been broken by a new band of gods called the Olympians, and now Shinigami-kun and I are trying to regain some of our power, which is where you would come in. She stated, and he frowned since he wasn't exactly thrilled at the concept of helping them out. If you agree to be our avatar, then we can regain our power and we will reward you. She stated, and Naruto snorted before dropping her and going over to a table with a candelabra on it and some equipment. Don't speak to me as if it just happened, Yami. The Olympians have been around for a while and I can assume that you're here because Kami lost his godhood and you and Shinigami can stop being cowards and fearful of his retaliation should you decide to help me. However, you need me more than I need you, since with enough time you and Shinigami will become mortal or just cease to exist while I'll still exist, since my guests live outside your laws and boundaries. So, the real question is, he stopped to turn and look at her. Why the hell should I help you? He asked as his eyes bored into her. Yami, while not exactly thrilled with his input, couldn't refute what he was saying, since at the time Kami was the most powerful and it would have been a long drawn-out battle to try and help Naruto after Kami's little fit that would have done more harm than good, and she knew right now Naruto could kill her easily if she pissed him off. With that in mind, she smiled. You're half right. We could have helped and we are becoming mortal, but you need us too, especially after you hear why you will want to become our avatar. She stated, getting him to raise an eyebrow towards her. You've already been somewhat fueling us, since each time you had the darkness consume a heart or drain dark essence you were unknowingly fueling me, and each person you killed that deserved it was fueling Shinigami-kun, since you were marked by his seal. As for why you would want to be our avatar, as our powers regrow we will bring back the people Kami took away from you. She stated, and Naruto froze before he growled at Yami as several of the candles went out and the darkness of the room seemed to grow in intensity. This had better not be a joke, Yami, or I will show you just how much pain a mortal can take before they want death. Naruto threatened as his eyes began to glow more ominous, and Yami just shook her head. I'm not joking, Naruto-kun. When we have a good portion of our power back that we could contend with one of the Olympians, we will start bringing your precious people back, and we will not ask anything of you unless we have no other choice in the matter. Yami stated, knowing how seriously Naruto took anything related to the people he cared about, and he'd literally tear through an army to protect them or their memory. Naruto was silent for a long while before he sighed. And I'm expected to believe that all I have to do is just go back to fighting the bad guys like I did over the parts of the millennia I decided to show myself again and again and nothing else, and you two are going to bring them back? Naruto asked incredulously, and Yami nodded. Yeah. Why do I feel that's a load of bullshit? He asked, eyeing her incredulously, and Yami sighed. Fine. The world is getting more people with powers again, as well as beings from other worlds, and, you know who, is worried that the world isn't being watched closely enough, so he wants someone to tip the scales in favor of the humans. You know how he always favored the race. She admitted, and Naruto snorted and rolled his eyes. Of course. So you and the Olympians are basically screwed if things don't start looking up for the world, and only you and Shinigami are taking it seriously. He stated before waving her off. Go, I'll head back to the States soon enough, but if you betray me, well, you know what I'll do. He stated, and Yami nodded before standing up. I'd never betray you, Naruto-kun, neither would Shinigami-kun, you know why as well. She stated before disappearing, and Naruto sighed before he began packing up his getaway and sealing a large trunk away too. So many years you just left me alone, now you want me to come back into the spotlight. Naruto mumbled to himself as he packed up before taking a cell phone with a seal array over it and dialed a number before hearing the line pick up. Mr. Fox, I will be entering the country in the next week or so and would like the usual livable wage with some extra thrown in to let me get a place to set up somewhere. He stated and waited for a response. No, I think I'll head on back to LA this time. I see. Well, I can send you all the relevant information on what's changed since you went out last. Fox stated on the other end, and Naruto hummed a moment. All right, send it the usual way and I'll contact you once I'm set up. Naruto stated before he got confirmation and the line went dead. Naruto put the phone down and sighed before he pulled some clothing out and changed before he put out all the candles and sealed the last of his items away before he disappeared without a trace. 3 days later. Private jet. Naruto had gone to India after leaving his little retreat before taking one of his off-the-books planes back to the States, only now his hair was golden blonde with red tips and his eyes were a deep cerulean blue. As he sat in one of the seats with a bottle of bourbon near him, he recalled how much of his life had turned out the way it did. Naruto had been born with the essence of darkness itself inside him courtesy of Yami and was outcasted by most because of it and the fact that he had the strongest Biju in existence sealed in his body by his father. Things remained that way for over a decade before he began making his name known for the right reasons and then began defeating all the threats to the world and wanted the simple life afterwards with the women he had claimed as his mates and who gladly claimed him as the love of their lives. However, Kami wouldn't hear of it and wanted Naruto as his warrior forever to put down anyone that Kami deemed too big a threat to the world, or in other words a threat to Kami's way of doing things. When Naruto refused, Kami sent his trusted warrior, the Angelus, in a new host after Naruto, and Naruto put the bitch down and then tore the Angelus out and consumed it with his darkness. Naturally, this really pissed Kami off and the bastard had retaliated by decimating everyone and thing Naruto ever cared about. As one would expect, Naruto retaliated and wiped out all of the followers of Kami and those that carried out his dirty work before he continued by destroying all the holy sites that were part of Kami's power and influence until nothing was left, and then the world split apart and everything of the time he first lived in was forgotten. Naruto's curse to bear was that the darkness, the Angelus, Kyuubi, and his own family's blood energized him and let him continue living without aging, keeping him looking like an 18 to 21-year-old for the remainder of his unnatural life, and this wouldn't have been so bad if he had his loves to spend the time with him along with his loyal friends, servants. Anyway, after the world changed, Naruto made appearances here and there, interfering in anything that caught his attention and keeping some places safe and sound for him to use, while also finding any and all items connected to the Angelus or darkness and building up an arsenal, library, and collection of items across history, while making investments and other things in each country to give himself some finances and possible aid later on. That leads to now. It had been over 25 years since he was last in the public eye in any notable manner, shape, or form, but now he was going to step back into the light and take on the world again to regain his loves and his brothers. Then he'd stick around for a while this time to see how the world would play out. Who knows, maybe he'd find some new loves and family in this world that has adapted and changed but most likely stayed the same. He just needed to see it for himself now. Los Angeles. Naruto stepped off the plane and grabbed his one bag before walking towards the terminal, since he still had to legally check in even if he could erase any record of him coming into the country. So, Naruto just waited while wearing a pair of crimson sunglasses, black cargo pants, combat boots with flames along the bottoms, a white button-up shirt, a flak jacket vest, and fingerless plate gloves. Naruto was aware of several of the women staring at him, since his clothes were form-fitting and showed the body he had kept that looked like a professional runner's. Only Naruto was far faster and stronger than any of them, but Naruto didn't care since he just wanted to get in and situated. When it was his turn, he stood before the TSA agent who was looking over the passport he gave. Purpose of your trip here, Mr. Kazama? She asked as she looked at Naruto intently, and Naruto removed his glasses. Business and to hopefully catch up with some old friends. He stated calmly, making the woman look at him before nodding and stamping his passport before handing it back to him before he left the terminal. After taking a taxi to the industrial part of town, Naruto walked to an old abandoned warehouse that had a fence and razor wire around, stating that it was private property and hazardous. Naruto merely jumped over and went to the door before slapping a seal on it, making it glow and overtake the whole building before he then entered. Naruto looked around and nodded to himself, seeing several piles of scrap and old machinery, and created several dozen clones to begin cleaning up and finding what could still be used. While they did that, Naruto decided to check out the city since it was pretty much night out. With that in mind, he flexed and the shadows of the area formed over him, putting him in a black armor with a red long-sleeved shirt under it, black cargo pants, boots with flames over them, crimson fingerless gloves, and a black trench coat with a crimson hidden leaf emblem on the back. Asterisk. On his face, he had a black swirled mask with a crimson eye hole, and his hair went black too. The mask was inspired by one of his opponents from his earlier lifetime named Obito, since it covered his face entirely except for the eye hole, and Naruto wanted his other eye covered since it was useful but only if it was in complete darkness. Once he was dressed, he left in a swirl of darkness while the clones began setting things up as they cleared the area. Streets of LA. Naruto was above the streets, standing there, letting his training in the sage arts let him feel everything within the city, and was searching for anything he needed to stop, or if someone with a dark enough heart was around for him to consume. He found one of the former within a minute or so and stood before vanishing again. He reappeared in an alley just as three thugs were cornering a young woman, with the middle thug having a knife. Please, I'll give you the money I have, just please me alone. She pleaded as two of the men smirked, but the third was grinning darkly at her. I have a better idea. You give us your money and let us have some fun before we decide to gut you open. He stated before he heard something behind him and saw someone dressed in black slamming his two goons into the ground, knocking them out. He tried brandishing his knife but was sent flying back when the figure appeared in front of him and punched him before he hit the wall, knocking him out. Naruto turned to the woman. Are you all right, miss? He asked, with his voice taking a deeper tone than it was without his mask before he was glomped by the woman as she thanked him repeatedly. Naruto merely stroked her back as she calmed down. Feeling better now? He asked, and she nodded before he moved away and tied the two up before grabbing the third and started walking away with him. Wait, why are you taking him? She asked, and Naruto paused before he sighed. Because his soul is tainted with so much blood and death that he needs to be stopped now. I can see into his very soul and his disgusts me to no end, so I must put him down before he does anything like this again, since he has a knack for avoiding jail. You see, you were not his first victim. He has raped several women and young girls over the last 2 years and has no remorse and has been evading prosecution for a long time, even when the evidence says it's him, so he needs to be stopped now. Those other two were satisfied to just rob you, but they were afraid he'd turn on them and kill them before they could do anything since he had the knife. While I despise their cowardice, that is not enough reason to kill them. He stated calmly, turning back towards the woman to let her see in his eye that he was serious. The woman frowned, since she was a bit of an expert on reading people after knowing a guy from her hometown for so long, and could tell this guy was dead serious. I see, but who are you? She asked, since she had never seen or heard of a person dressed like he was before. Naruto was silent for a moment before he spoke his old codename when he helped militaries and what was a significant rank in his time, Kage. "You can call me Kage," he stated before taking the man and disappearing in a swirl of darkness. The woman looked around in confusion before sighing and pulled her phone out to call the police and report the two there and this strange new guy in town. With Naruto standing on a building using his sage senses again while his darkness manifested as two strange pitch-black eel-like creatures with red tribal markings over them coming out of his back and over his shoulders, and the left one went over the thug's face and opened its maws before the thug gasped as a dark essence was sucked out him before the right one launched forward and into the thug's chest and tore his heart out before it began eating it. Naruto then did a simple fire jutsu to burn the body away before he took off after hearing gunfire at the nearby bank. Once he reached an overlooking building, he saw that several thugs with guns were having a standoff with the police, with them using columns for cover while the police were pinned behind their cars with one injured and trapped between the fields of fire. Frowning to himself, he shunshined down to the injured officer and grabbed the car she was behind before flipping it so the top was facing the bank. Naruto then turned to the officer. "Hang on to me," he stated, and the officer nodded before Naruto lifted her into his arms and grabbed the car and dragged it behind him as he moved back to the other officers, who were laying down suppressive fire. Naruto gave the officer to the others before he turned and kicked the car, sending it towards the bank, causing the thugs to move out of the way as it smashed into the columns. Naruto then raised his hand and a swirl of darkness came up and blocked the bullets from the thugs as he walked towards the bank before he moved faster than anyone could track and kicked one, sending him out into the open as Naruto broke the gun over his knee. He then moved again and slammed two of them into each other before tossing them out into the open and broke their guns as well before going after the rest of the thugs. Within a minute, Naruto had the thugs lying on the ground unconscious for the police to take and had a pile of destroyed weapons before an armored truck plowed through the rear gate and came around and was aiming right at Naruto. "I got you now, you son of a bitch," the driver exclaimed as he slammed down the accelerator and aimed it right at Naruto. Naruto merely looked at it before forming a blue sphere in his hand that was the size of his palm and slammed it into the front of the truck as it came in range. The sphere tore right through the armor, hood, and the engine before stopping at the cab with the truck formed around Naruto. While the onlookers were all gobsmacked at what they saw, Naruto walked around and tore the door off before pulling the driver out and tossed him with the others. Naruto popped his neck before turning to leave, but was stopped by one of the police. "Hey! Who are you?" he asked as Naruto rolled his eyes and just looked back at him. "The name's Kage. LA is under my protection now," he stated before disappearing and reappearing on another building and continued his own style of patrol. 2 hours later, Naruto had finished up his patrol while having some clones out and about just in case of any late, early type people tried anything. At the moment, he was next to a large generator type item and was currently working on it mechanically while a clone was doing some fuinjutsu to turn the generator into a chakra running one to be his power supply for the place to avoid attention being drawn to him. Behind him, another clone was working on an in-house garden with a seal being put on the ceiling to let sun rays in on them to help them, and a storage seal in the planters that were connected to a large tank that would feed the plants water when the soil dried to a certain point, since Naruto loved his plants and it was one of the few things he had to occupy him over the millennia. On the wall to Naruto's right, which was the leftmost wall as you walk in, there was a large weapons wall under a cage with the weapons ranging from guns to swords, axes to staves, knives to tomahawks, and each had a dark aura around it. These were weapons that had absorbed some of Naruto's darkness, had been crafted by Naruto using his darkness, and or had been used to kill many people and thus had become more tainted over time. The reason they were locked under a cage wasn't for their protection, it was to protect anyone that may try to touch them, since it may not end well for their lives, let alone their souls. Next to that was another smaller caged wall with different yet still deadly items on it from the time of the elemental countries, as well as the Horatian kunai that his father had created, though someone in the know would notice that two particular swords weren't on the wall. Beside that was another wall mount of weapons, but this was a range of all kinds of weapons and some showed they were very old. This was Naruto's memory trophy wall that he built over the years, and it had many famous weapons of famous individuals, with each being marked and the years in which it was used, including Blackbeard's cutlass, George Washington's sword, General Putnam's pistols, and more. To Naruto's left was an oak bed that could fit 2 or 3 people, with a couch and TV in front of it, with the TV being on a small table, and it was currently showing the new Tonight, LA has gotten a few appearances of a brand new hero to the scene, and one that has decided to make Los Angeles his home and protectorate. At long last, the City of Angels has its own hero to call its own. His name, its cage, which our experts say means shadow in Japanese. The following footage was taken by one of our cameramen in nearby cameras at the scene of tonight's bank robbery. The reporter, reported as footage of him saving the officer and defeating the thugs in the armored truck played. In addition to this bravery, we have reports that state that this new hero also saved a young woman, a Miss Lana Lang, from being mugged and raped by 3 individuals. However, we also have reports that Cage also took one of the men with him to apparently kill him, since Miss Lang reported that he stated he could see the sin and darkness of the man's soul, and that the man was unredeemable and would commit such acts again, since he had apparently already done so in the past. Based on the description Miss Lang gave of the third perpetrator, our sources have confirmed the man, whose name we do not have, was wanted for no less than a dozen rapes and murders, and always got out of state before he could be prosecuted. So far, the police have not found a body, which poses the question of what exactly this new hero has done with the man's body. The reporter stated before it broke to another story and Naruto turned it off. "I'm the least of people's worries, lady. You should be more concerned with the people who let these other people go free," he muttered as he kept working on the generator while some clones were still going through the junk and scrap that was still in the warehouse, while 2 other clones were at anvils with hammers making some of the scrap into other things he could use or even sell. He finished up one last bolt before slapping the generator, and it started up, getting the few still working lights back up and the 2 clones by the anvil's side in relief. "Oh, thank the universe, it sucks using lightning and fire chakra for welding," they stated as they pulled up an arch welder and plugged it in, with one continuing to hammer on the anvil while the other began welding some other pieces together. While they did that, Naruto went to his bed and pulled his laptop out and began reviewing the information that Fox had sent him, and he was both intrigued and annoyed by the heroes of the current world. Intrigued since their powers and capabilities were admirable, but annoyed because none of them had the heart to put an end to the enemies that needed to be put down once and for all. Naruto was all for second chances and letting someone turn over a new leaf, but after the second or third let down he was done with you, and if you crossed him he was going to put you down one way or the other. Another thing he noted was the various beautiful women on both the villains and heroes' side, and idly wondered how many would potentially join his family, since his wives, all told, ordered him to find others to love and be loved by, and there weren't many to catch his attention over the millennia, since Naruto liked strong yet kind women that he knew he could love and watch his back regardless of what they faced. The ones that had caught his attention had become his loves too, and he lost them to Kami's wrath and other things that he couldn't change at the time. Now though, Now he had the chance to bring all of his loves back and his other precious people, but that wouldn't stop him from finding others since there was no telling when Yami and Shinigami would keep their promise, and his loves told him before that they never minded more sisters. Shaking those thoughts away for another time, Naruto read over more of the information before he decided to get a couple hours of sleep. Next night, Naruto was sitting on a ledge of another building, letting his sage senses find anything he needed to concern himself with, while clones back at his base were setting up the items he had purchased that morning, which included computer components, scrap, light bulbs, wiring, tools, various building materials, some home security cameras, and more. Naruto had also scouted several abandoned properties as well, planning to buy them later once he had another major source of income coming his way, which he planned to do via forging weapons and other items, as well as writing stories about his life over the millennia, knowing that anyone that could confirm or know it was truth was dead or was going to be on his side once Yami and Shinigami began bringing them back. He broke from his musings when he felt a spike in 3 chakras before green fire blasted out of a nearby park, and Naruto stood before he phased out of existence and headed towards the area. When he arrived, he found an interesting sight of a dark-skinned woman with green hair and a green outfit standing beside a dark-skinned woman with pure white hair and wore an icy blue and snow-white outfit, and both were facing off against a pale woman with blue hair and lips and wore a blue one-piece strapless outfit with frost around her. All three's outfits showed off their bodies quite well, and Naruto knew some models would kill to have their bodies. He also knew that these 3 were Fire, Ice, and Killer Frost respectively, with the first 2 being heroines that didn't seem to have a main place to stay, and the third was a villain, but Naruto knew she was mainly doing everything to get funding to cure herself, since she was the victim of an accident that changed her and people shunned her afterwards. It idly reminded Naruto of the lives Jinchuriki, or demon containers, lived, since they didn't willingly become what they were, but they had to deal with it afterwards. Looking around them, Naruto frowned, seeing the park almost ruined since there was ice and burn marks everywhere, and the 3 looked a little rough as well. With that in mind, Naruto flipped through some hand seals before he stuck his hand out between the 3. The 3 were about to clash again when they saw blackened ice rise up between them and form a figure 8 around them, trapping them inside. Frowning, the 3 tried to use their respective powers, with fire literally becoming on fire, to get out. However, the 2 ice users found that they couldn't control or break it, and fire found she couldn't melt it. They then turned to the side as one wall gained the appearance of Naruto there. I must say, your powers are impressive even if they aren't as strong as mine, Naruto stated, looking over them as they frowned. Who the hell are you? Killer Frost asked, while the other 2 were wondering as well. I am Cage. You 3 are fighting in my city and destroying the park here. I do not like that, he stated as he gazed over them intently, and the 3 would be lying if they said they weren't unnerved by his gaze. We were only trying to stop her, Ice defended, making Naruto look at her, and his one eye showed he wasn't in the mood for excuses or reasons. Then you should have led her or let her get away from the populated area, Naruto growled as the ice prison suddenly grew colder and shrunk in size. Do you have any idea the number of people you endangered should one of your attacks have missed and hit one of the nearby buildings? Naruto argued, clenching his hands, and the 2 heroines had the decency to look somewhat ashamed, and Naruto turned to Killer Frost and saw that despite her cold appearance she wasn't too keen on causing mass casualties. Naruto let the silence remain for a long moment before he walked out of the wall to Killer Frost, making her tense as he looked her over and walked around her. How interesting, he stated, making her frown. What? Never seen another metahuman before? She asked, ready to turn him into an icicle should the opportunity present itself. He. You're not truly a metahuman, kid, but you aren't full human either, or at least a normal human. He stated, since he felt the familiar cold aura of the Yuki clan and wondered if perhaps Haku's clan had survived beyond just her in his young years. What the hell does that mean? She asked in both confusion and slight irritation, since the guy sounded like he knew something about her and was calling her a kid. Naruto merely chuckled. It means that if you can behave yourself, then the next time you visit my city I may be willing to tell you about your family history that you're not aware of, plus something else that I know you've sought for a long time and I can help provide if you cooperate. Naruto stated vaguely, but the message was clear as Killer Frost widened her eyes in shock before narrowing in anger. You better not be messing with me or I'll freeze you before I start snapping pieces off. She threatened, and Naruto merely chuckled. Lady, you couldn't beat me on my worst day with your ice powers, but I'm not lying or messing with you. He stated as he waved and the circle of ice they were standing in came down. Feel free to leave, but if you come back for answers then you had better be on a better behavior, since I don't care for others endangering innocent people. He stated before turning to the heroine still in his ice, and Killer Frost quickly took off. Naruto approached the heroines as his ice shattered and the two looked at him wearily before he simply walked past them and placed his hand on the ground before he sent his chakra into the ground, healing the scorch marks and melting the ice. Once it was done, Naruto nodded, sighed and began walking away, causing Fire and Ice to look at each other before they followed him. Any particular reason you just let a notorious criminal go? Fire asked as she and Ice followed Naruto. Because A, she hadn't done anything yet, B, she's just trying to get back to normal and has no other way to do it since the people that could do it aren't exactly lining up to try and help her, and C, because I didn't feel like beating her unconscious or incapacitating her in some other method and then letting her get taken to prison. Naruto stated nonchalantly as he idly fixed more damage that was done to the park before continuing to walk before he tossed them two masks and they raised eyebrows in confusion before seeing several officers and camera crews there and knew he was working to hide their facial identities, which is why they quickly put the masks on. Naruto ignored many of the questions coming his way before he paused at one. Cage, why did you let Killer Frost, a notorious criminal, go when she should have been arrested? A reporter asked, making Naruto stop before he turned towards said reporter. Because there was no reason to punish her when she hadn't done anything wrong in this city. Even if she had, I would have simply taken whatever she had stolen and returned it, as she is merely trying to get back to how she was before. He stated calmly, making several of the people blink while more questions were coming in at once. Cage, how can you justify her actions that are criminal and unlawful? Another reporter asked. Because the real crime is the fact that all of our supposed great humanitarians and leading researchers have never once offered her a chance to be studied and possibly cured, and no one has ever offered her help in funding her research to turn herself back to a normal person. The fact that many people ignore this sickens me to no end. Yes, she has done wrong, but that is no reason to alienate her to the point she becomes the monster that everyone fears she is. The fact that no one has offered her a chance to become normal again, which she desires above all else, is infuriating, and she can serve the time for her crimes either during or after her curing process or even before to get her full cooperation, and this is applicable to more than just Killer Frost. I plan to correct these outrages whenever I am given the chance. There's enough hate in the world already without us adding onto it. He stated seriously and with a tone in his voice that people could tell he was passionate about what he was saying, and it was hitting home for the two heroines beside him. Without another word, Naruto walked away before leaping up to the rooftops and disappearing, with the reporters all resuming their questioning of the police, and Fire and Ice made themselves scarce to avoid the questionings. The two looked for Cage to talk with him more, but found it was to no avail and decided to retire for the evening while making mental notes to look him up the next time they were in LA. With Killer Frost. Killer Frost, or as she used to be known, Crystal Frost, was currently making tracks from LA since she knew she couldn't handle Fire, Ice, and the mystery man named Cage, and was planning to lay low before heading to a different city. However, the words Cage spoke were still ringing in her ears, and she couldn't fight the curiosity that she felt even if her better judgment screamed against it. She stopped as she landed near a river and saw her reflection as a soul tear went down her cheek and froze along the way. She missed being her old self known as Crystal Frost, but there was no one left that remembered her as she was, and certainly no one willing to help her turn back. And now comes this guy who claims to know something about her and can maybe help her and wasn't lying. She knew this since she had become an expert on reading people, and it showed clearly in his eye that he wasn't lying to her. She stood there staring at her reflection for what felt like hours to her before she sighed, "I guess I'll have to hear him out next time I decide to hit LA." She stated before taking off again, not noticing she had been releasing tears that didn't freeze. Back in LA, Naruto was back in his meditative state after having stopped several minor events and had fed his darkness plenty of both darkness and hearts due to several being gang members that were long overdue for a trip to the afterlife and left some of the bodies this time as a message. Naruto idly made a note to go after their main locations on their turf and put the fear of God into the ones that survived, if any did, that is. Shaking those thoughts away, Naruto stood and made 10 clones to patrol the city while he returned home for the night, knowing that the coming week was probably going to be problematic since the gangs that had lost members that day weren't going to take it lying down. He also needed to check on the seals he put in place to expand the warehouse interior to accommodate more of his large quantity of items, as well as reinforcing the walls since a few were less than satisfactory, as the clones found after clearing some of the crates and scrap left behind before they began breaking down the machinery left behind. It also reminded him that he needed to finish up some more of the shopping he had planned for fixing up and upgrading the warehouse even further. With that in mind, he returned to his home base and was glad to see the seals and other security he set up was working fine. Once he entered, he sat on the couch and tapped a seal on the table, making a bowl of hot ramen pop out, and he sat back and ate while a clone popped, giving him all the latest information that he would need to know, and sighed since it was going to still be a while before this place was fully functional, but there was no rush and he could earn some money while he worked on the place. 4 days later, several police cars and a SWAT truck were around an apartment complex as they had a bit of a hostage situation with one of the local gangs that apparently wanted Cage to come in for what he did to some of their members. Naturally, there were several reporters there, all giving their own takes on the situation, or live in downtown LA, as the police have sealed off the area as a portion of the local gang known as Los Muertos, or the Dead, have taken up residence in an abandoned apartment building. Apparently, they hijacked a bus full of people before bringing them here to be held in an attempt to get the new hero Cage's attention after he apparently killed a few members of their crew family. So far, we have not seen any trace of Cage yet, and it begs the question on if he will show or not. Just as the reporter finished speaking, gunfire broke out inside the apartment building along with various screaming people on one of the lower floors. Cuidado. Detrás de ti. Look out. Behind you. Someone shouted from inside, which was clearly heard due to the SWAT equipment set up to try and gain the advantage through listening, as more gunfire echoed out on the floor before an explosion went off, shattering a few windows. The building was quiet for a few moments until the next few floors suddenly lit up with gunfire like the one below them, with more screams being heard from inside. The police were all rooted in place, not really wanting to go in and see the apparent massacre that was going on inside, since something or someone powerful or skilled and dangerous was dealing with the Los Muertos members, and they didn't want to get in the way of whatever was causing the screams and so much gunfire. The few higher-ups in charge were also hearing from the snipers that were in position that they couldn't see anything in the building besides the occasional splatter of blood on the windows. "Por qué no mueres? Why don't you die?" they heard screamed from inside before silence echoed out from the building and no one dared to move or breathe. The silence was then shattered as a window on the top floor was shattered as a body was sent out and it fell straight down onto one of the cop cars, and the officers approached the body and saw that there was a blade sticking through the lower back before they rolled the body over. Upon doing so, it revealed that the body belonged to a lieutenant and enforcer of the Los Muertos named Rodrigo Cortez, aka El Carnicero, the Butcher. Said man had gained the title after having literally butchered anyone that was ever captured that crossed the Los Muertos, and was the one sent to deal with anyone that pissed off the higher-ups of the LA branch of the Los Muertos cartel, and the man loved his machete to deal with anyone and everyone that he was sent after. Currently, the machete was through the stomach region of the man's corpse. However, there was one other very noticeable difference from how he usually looked. His chest cavity was ripped apart and showed his heart had been removed forcibly. A few of the rookie officers had to move away and empty their stomachs, while even some of the veterans looked disturbed by what they were seeing, and the reporters were trying not to look while they reported. Everyone then turned as the front doors opened and the hostages came out, with some looking completely fine despite having blood splattered on them, and others looked completely shaken with what had happened in there, whatever it was. Medics and officers took the hostages away to get checked out and questioned, and a pair of officers with the ranks of detective moved to enter with their guns drawn. One was a grizzled man with a scruffy face and an eye patch over his right eye, and had a harness over his uniform that consisted of jeans, combat boots, flak jacket, long-sleeved shirt, and thick coat, all a gunmetal gray. He also had a lit cigarette in his mouth before he flicked it away as he moved with military-like precision. The other detective was a dark-skinned man with a buzz-cut hairstyle and a scruffy face. He wore boots, black jeans, a red muscle shirt, bulletproof vest over the shirt, black leather jacket with a red tribal design on the back, and fingerless gloves on his hands. Like the previous one, he also moved with military-like precision. The two entered the building side by side just as they had done previous times, working together, and moved through the lobby entry area, finding nothing there but a body in the middle of the stairwell, indicating that he was thrown, pushed, or fell from one of the higher floors and landed there, and, based on the blood pooling, he was either alive or recently dead when he hit. Turning to the stairs, the two climbed up the first flight and paused, seeing the decimated bodies, hundreds of shell casings, and guns lying about. Some of the corpses had bullet wounds, others had cuts and stabs, and still others were broken, torn, ripped, cut apart in ways that defied normal explanation. The other noticeable thing was that the corpses that they could see clearly all had similar chest wounds that Cortez had, in that they didn't have their hearts anymore. I don't like this snake. While these bastards deserved what they got, I can't help but feel this is above our pay grade. The dark-skinned detective stated in a deep voice while looking over everything impassively, since he and his partner had seen worse in the military. The now-named snake grunted, "I agree, Heller, but we still need to look around to see if who or whatever did this is still here," he stated with a gravelier tone of voice than the now-named Heller, who hummed in thought before nodding. They continued through the next couple of floors, finding more of the same until the last floor, where they found 5 Los Muertos members unconscious and tied to the railing above the stairwell, and from the looks of them, they were merely recruits put into this situation as a test and hadn't been marked by the cartel yet. They then noticed that one was still somewhat awake and moved over to him as Heller began scanning the area, and Snake tried to get the man to focus. "Hey. Are you alright? Who did this?" he asked as the man groaned slightly and looked at him. "Please, keep it away from me," he stated in a tired yet panicked voice before he passed out again. Snake frowned before pulling up his radio. "We need EMTs on the top floor and body bags on all the others," he stated before hearing an officer give confirmation on the request before both he and Heller turned as the sound of something eating was heard before a sigh. The two quickly moved towards the sound that occurred from one of the back apartments and stood beside the doorway before Heller entered first and then Snake, and they saw nothing. No person, no creature, no strange phenomenon, nothing but a rundown apartment with the broken window. However, their instincts that they had honed over years of combat experience warned them that something was there even if they couldn't see it, and Snake noticed there was some blood on the floor. "So, 2 of Law's finest have come to see my little extermination." Naruto's deeper voice echoed over the room, making the two go back to back. "Cage, I presume?" Heller asked as he looked around and knew it was going to be bad if they had to fight the city's apparent new hero. Not because he was a hero, but because of his skill and power, making it a pretty much suicide mission with just the 2 of them. "Yes, though we have encountered each other before. Lieutenant David, Solid Snake, Smith, and Sergeant James, Reaper, Heller," Naruto stated, seeing the 2 stiffen as he knew their names, ranks, and code names for operations. "Really? Refresh my memory if you'd be so kind," Snake stated as he wanted to know if this so-called hero was an enemy of theirs or not. 10 years ago, in Afghanistan, those insurgents ambushed your unit and had you pinned down before someone began attacking the insurgents, making them stop focusing on you and allowed you to get away while all the insurgents were killed just after you left, Naruto stated, since he had been passing through the area just to stretch his legs and found the attack in progress and decided to step in. He watched amusedly as the 2 men widened their eyes, knowing they'd have been dead or at least would have lost most of their unit if he hadn't interfered. "Yes, that was a close call for you, wasn't it?" Naruto commented as he looked at the 2. "Yes, it was, and now you are here waging your own war on the criminals?" Snake asked as he knew someone with that level of skill to take down the insurgents, and now this whole building without getting a hostage hurt meant that he was either extremely skilled, powerful, or both. "Yes, and why not? You certainly would do the same. The only difference is that I can tell who is innocent enough to get a chance at redemption and who just needs to be put down. Case in point, those 5 tied to the railing. They were new recruits and their only crimes are killing other gangbangers, and even then, most of the times were in self-defense because the gangbangers attacked them first. However, this is only the start, since I will break apart the gangs from head to grunt and make sure that the innocent people of this city are safer than they currently are," Naruto informed as he appeared before the 2 from the shadows. "I would appreciate cooperation on your and the police's part, that way I can find and eliminate the key players and then leave the grunts for you all to round up, since they will have a great deal of infighting to take the open positions, which will result in their forces being dwindled down even further, and the outside influences of these groups will lose their connection, and it will be more costly than productive to try and bring any veterans. They have to re-establish their trade here or make a loud statement about interfering in their investments," Naruto stated and explained, and the 2 had to give him that since it was part of the work they had done overseas before, breaking down an enemy hierarchy by taking out the leaders and letting the grunts and normal soldiers clean up the lower ranks. Main difference was that this time, they were the normal soldiers in this situation. However, both had to admit they were highly annoyed and angered by the gangs that were slowly taking over the city, and they didn't want to even try and count the number of officers that had fallen to the bastards. However, they weren't exactly thrilled with possible mass murder of the groups either, even if it was looking like it would be the only way to stop them, though for part of them it was the cleanup and paperwork. Naruto stared at them for a few moments before speaking again. Your answer does not have to be right away, but make no mistake, I will be bringing them all down regardless of if you decide to help me or not, so try to steer clear if you get near the fighting. He stated as he stepped back into the darkness of the room with the sounds of others coming up the stairs being heard. You'll hear from me again. Naruto stated before vanishing into the shadows, with Snake and Heller relaxing as other officers arrived, though they all looked a little green. Snake sighed and holstered his pistol before taking a cigarette and lit it before taking a few puffs. Secure this place and bag and tag everything, he ordered of the other officers, who nodded and holstered their pistols before moving about to do as ordered, while Snake and Heller began heading down the stairs and outside to think on what just happened. With Naruto was standing atop the Wilshire Grand Center with a squad of clones behind him before he flicked his fingers and the clones spread out in search of the key players of the three gangs and learned their routines, number of guards, weapons, favored bases, and everything else he needed to ambush them and remove them from this world and feed his darkness along with Shinigami and Yami. Then he could see about branching out to the other cities. Naruto was relaxing in his little base of operations as he was working on a second generator for the place, since he wanted to ensure that as he got more equipment set up the draw wouldn't exceed what his one could produce, since he wanted as much tech ready as possible, since he didn't want to rely on the cops to do analysis for him should he need it. He knew Snake and Heller were reliable and not corrupt, but for the three cartels to grow as far as they did, they'd have to have had different politicians and cops on the payroll, which meant that he had more targets to remove, whether through turning them into the police or removing them his way, whichever they deserved. For now though, he'd focus on taking the gangs down a few pegs, and thanks to some of their soldiers that he took care of, he had some intel to start on. All three were dangerous in their own way and had only grown more dangerous with the room they've had to grow. The first was Los Muertos, the dead, or at least the American branch led by Don Domingo Garcia, the little brother of the top security enforcer of the main branch of the cartel in Mexico, Marco Chico Garcia. The American branch started out by the Mexican heads sending 4 mid-level bosses from across their turf, which stretched from Mexico down to Rio de Janeiro, to America, where they struggled for few years before they gained momentum and gained 3 more bosses from the local talent. Los Muertos' main focus is drugs and firepower, and they back up their business with raw strength and superior driving skills and then resort to heavy firepower afterwards. The first step to removing them is to make them squirm, which is why the first 2 targets for them were Juan El Numero Martinez, the treasurer and bookkeeper for the cartel, and Jose Guerra, the head of the drug distribution, shipping, and selling. Martinez was holed up in an apartment complex the cartel bought and was now lived in by no one other than Martinez's personal security and Martinez himself. Guerra was holed up in his personally owned nightclub with his own hitters and a convoy of vehicles waiting to get him out of the area should the need arise. As for why them first, Martinez used the funds not only to entice new muscle, but also pay off people for information on anything and everything, or keep cops off their back when needed, so shutting him down would get the cartel numbers lower as well as cut their supply of information and protection. Guerra was the personal provider for the drug-addicted cartel members as well as being the personal supplier for the American branch of the cartel. With him gone, the drugged-up members will become slower and more unstable as they can't get the same product, meaning most of them would be dead or removed soon enough. There was also the added benefit that by hurting them it also would piss off the higher-ups in Mexico, as their money and product would be delayed. In Naruto planned to hurt them more by destroying whatever he could find at the two boss locations. Well, maybe not all the money, but you get the point. Bleed them money and destroy the product, and the higher-ups would be pissed. The second was the Volk, the Wolves, a cartel that started off as a band of ex-military personnel that were tired of low pay and no recognition and decided to turn to something more profitable: organized crime. Sure, they attempted the private security sector before they realized that crime was not only easier but could make extra workers for them. They were led by ex-Russian Spetsnaz commander Vladimir the Wolf Goliak, and each of his commanders in the cartel were specialists from his hand-picked team, each having a specialized field that gave the cartel the edge in various places and made his starting fortune by doing less than legal contracts for different groups all over the world. Now their focus was on making money and getting immigrants from all over to add to their growing army. Their main specialty were weapons and explosives, but they had some decent wheelmen, and their connections to the black market and underworld in Europe only helped them get what they need when they need it, provided they could pay for it. The first step to removing them was to weaken their patrols and cutting their supply line of weapons and such. To that end he was aiming for Igor Bigorov, who was in charge of acquiring vehicles and militarizing them, including hijacking vehicles from people and selling any cargo some vehicles may possess to his own black market contacts, who would then give him discounts on vehicles, and Sergei Sovetnik Juriev, who was the main contact for the majority of the black market and underworld dealings and was making workers work continuously to make cheap fuel that he then sells on the black market. Igor was in an old bus depot that they retrofitted to work as an industrial-grade chop shop, with his loyal gators watching for anything of value on the street and bringing it to him when they weren't protecting him. Sergei was in an old refinery that now served as a place to store the weapons until they could be moved effectively, while also letting him produce and ship cheap fuel. Naturally, removing Igor would not only cut down on the grade of vehicles the Volk had, but it would also cut down on the amount of carjackings, thus letting people feel a bit safer, while Sergei's removal would choke the flow of new armaments and explosives coming to the Volk, thus making any new members under-equipped and easier prey, while also hitting the Volk's finances, thus hindering their acquisition of new weaponry and explosives. Removing them both would effectively hit the defenses and armaments they had, thus making the other bosses easier targets and giving the cops more breathing room. The third and possibly most dangerous cartel was the Shy General Corporation, led and founded by the mysterious man Zhuanglun Wang. Based on rumors, and somewhat confirmed thanks to Fox's digging, Wang was a survivor of the Japanese occupation of China during World War II and, before coming to America at 15, had killed 3 Japanese officers before the British and other Allied forces liberated it. Afterwards, Wang began making his name known in Chinatown and became a part of the triads before he allegedly went legit and used his blood money to form Shy General. However, this was false, and he used both his contacts in the triads and some former experts he encountered in his life at one point or another to build up his own cartel before he turned on the triads and removed them from the playing board entirely, either through killing or turning evidence against them. Naturally, this also helped Wang become increasingly paranoid, so he only stayed in one of 2 locations now, with his personal army guarding him 24/7, whether in the States or back in China, where he worked to extend his reach even further. Their specialty was information gathering in response while also having their image showing in nothing but a positive light as a cutting-edge company dedicated to removing corruption and fighting crime, basically keeping image up while destroying the threats to them. The first step for them were a pair of individuals that specialized in their key factors. The public image and their intelligence, Thaddeus Oakley, the PR specialist for all of Shy General that ensured the company was in a good light and helped with recruiting and company training, meaning brainwashing that the company comes first, and the second was Melissa Fang Yin, the head of Shy Gen's Secret Service who checked all the corporate cameras set up across their section of the city and reported it to her loyal and dedicated enforcers, who removed threats or handled situations before they could damage the company image or their profit margin. Thaddeus was holed up in an expo center that he used for indoctrination and training when there were no events, which was often, and Fang Yin was in a custom-built intelligence center just outside the LA city limits, and both had their personal guard and workers who were all prepared to die to kill intruders and ensure no one touched the bosses. Naturally, removing Thaddeus would drop the PR image and lessen the dedication the members had for the company, and removing Fang Yin would essentially blind the group as she was the only one who knew the whole system as well as the locations and ranges of all the cameras. The reason that this was going to start to destroy the different networks was because they had no second in command to take over for them. They were the only ones with the connections, knowledge, and know how to use the different areas correctly, as well as having strict standards, meaning once he removed them, the area was getting shut down since none of their workers could replace them effectively. With no viable replacements, or at least poor replacements, the standards would plummet and would hurt the bottom line for all of them. While this wasn't as damning for the Volk, it was very dangerous for Shigen and Los Muertos, since Wang's investors would get angry and Los Muertos would answer to the main branch about the loss of money and product. Now, for those wondering why he wasn't just going straight for the heads of the snakes, well, it wasn't that simple. Each group would react differently if the boss was just removed while the lieutenants and captains were still around. Los Muertos would have some infighting over who was to lead, thus leading to a lot of killing and innocent people getting dragged in until the main branch of Los Muertos sent someone to clean up the mess. The Volk would simply continue with who was the next highest rank and go on business as usual, and Shigen would just have a new president and then focus all their efforts on killing whoever was responsible and use any and all methods they needed to do it, including taking out civilians if they didn't get information. Basically, they'd all cause problems for the people before anything damning happened to them. Naruto planned to head out once the sun set and begin removing these people, since doing it in broad daylight wasn't the best of ideas, at least for now. The one low side was that if he didn't keep the pressure on, then the three may decide to band together to try and remove him. While it wouldn't work, it could still cause a lot of problems for the city, as it could become a war zone of them trying to kill him and him just tearing them to pieces. Literally and figuratively. He broke from his musings when his proximity sensors began going off and he looked at the monitors to see a blonde-haired woman about 5 feet 8 inches with olive green eyes wearing a torn yellow jacket, short shorts, thigh-high boots which were half white half black, a baseball cap, a low belt around her waist, goggles around her neck, black racing gloves, and a pink bra, which was visible from her jacket being open and torn, climbing the fence to get away from squads of all three cartels, and they seemed more intent on getting her than killing each other. Being the chivalrous man that he was, Naruto quickly called an outfit, which was the same except now his boots were normal, and left his warehouse to chase the guys. As the girl ran for her life, the three squads of goons finally noticed each other and three of each broke off to fight each other as the others all chased after the girl. As the 9 were about to go guns blazing, they were suddenly skewered by dark tendrils rising out of the ground before Naruto arose between them with the tendrils connected to him. Naruto then glared before 9 of the eel heads arose from his back and went to the goons before sucking the dark essence out of them, and the tendrils ripped out of them, tearing their hearts out. The tendrils then changed into 9 more leviathans and consumed the hearts before Naruto sunk back into the ground to chase the remaining goons. The girl ducked into one of the other warehouses with the goons right behind her as they approached it from different angles to box her in. As they entered, they failed to notice the last in line getting torn away from the entrances before being removed. The different groups began moving through the machinery and boxes left over from when the warehouse was used and split up, making them easy prey for Naruto, who was sticking to the ceiling above them. Naruto's back shifted slightly before 10 eels, called leviathans, came out and began slithering along the ceiling and walls heading for some of the goons. While they were doing that, several tendrils sprouted from his back and skewered several of the squads through their faces before ripping out of them. Naturally, the bodies hitting the floor attracted to the attention of some of the others, but before they could sound off, a tendril went down their throats and ripped their hearts out before returning to Naruto. Naruto then smirked and used a tendril to grab a piece of piping before he aimed and hurled it down at the goons, skewering 2 who were back to back. This made people notice, and it was that moment that the leviathans attacked, launching at the faces of their targets and ripping out their throats. Before the other goons could go into a panic, the warehouse suddenly went black as the windows wouldn't let light in, and the goons began firing upwards wildly while seeing flashes of Naruto and his darkness tearing some of the others apart. For the next 2 minutes, the girl was huddled behind a stack of boxes trying to block the sound of screams, gunfire, and inhuman sounds of flesh tearing, something eating, and growling. Then everything went quiet and she saw the darkness was gone and slowly looked out from behind the crates to see Naruto standing there, and she scrambled back. "Are you all right, miss?" Naruto asked, kneeling down in front of her. "Please, don't hurt me. I'm not with them, they tried to force me to help them," she stated, shaking in fear and sadness before she saw a hand at her. "It's all right. I'm not going to harm you," he stated kindly, with his eyes being blue again to help her feel at ease, and it worked since she took his hand and he helped her stand before he caught her when she started to fall. Looking her over, he found that she was hit by a stray round and quickly carried her back to his warehouse while some clones cleaned up the bodies. "It's all right, hang on," he stated, moving quickly as she passed out before he entered his warehouse and put her on the bed before he called 2 clones, with one beginning a diagnostic jutsu of her while the other was setting up a homemade IV bag before hooking it to her arm, and the original began healing the obvious wound. Naruto then sat back and made several clones to get the vehicles inside since he could start dismantling and working on them as he pleased. He then pulled a cell phone out and dialed one number. "Fox, I'm going to send you a picture of a young girl. I want you to dig up everything you can on her because several parties are interested in her and I want to know why," he stated, getting a confirmation on the other end of the line before a bit more came over the line. "She looks familiar but I don't know why or from where, which means it would have to be just a passing sight or something," Naruto stated, getting an agreement over the line before Naruto took a few pictures of the girl's face and sent them before he went and opened the warehouse doors to allow the vehicles in. He also sent a pair of clones out to buy some tools for dismantling a car, or 10. It was 10 minutes later that his computer went off and he saw files from Fox and began reviewing the files that came up and raised his eyebrows in surprise as he looked over her info. "Well, that explains why they are after her. Someone of her skill set would be invaluable to the groups," he muttered before he saw a job and home address and made 2 clones to check both before he got back to work on the second generator. 2 hours later, the girl groaned as she began to wake up and felt herself being comfortable and opened her eyes to see some kind of warehouse before she saw an IV of fluids connected to her arm and heard some machinery going off, machinery she knew very well. Hey, watch that V8 engine. I don't want to have to rebuild the fuel injector or the pistons because you want to do it fast over doing it right. And you, watch those axles. They're solid, and even if they aren't the best possible, I'm not leaving us some short because you got chop happy and ruined good metal. 80. Strip those chrome and gold pieces off and we'll sell them later. She heard a voice shout before hearing voices nearly identical yell out apologies or confirmative. Hey boss. The girl's awake and looks like she's healing alright too. Another, closer, voice shouted, and she noticed her body was sore, which she wasn't that surprised by since she had been running fast and hard to get away from those cartel goons. She had the slight relief that she wasn't being held by them, as she wouldn't be in a comfy bed with an IV. They'd have taken her to one of their doctors and then immediately moved her away. She then looked as she felt someone come close to her and saw the new hero of the city. How do you feel, Miss Cindy? Naruto asked, and she blushed as she could feel the concern, and his eye was the deepest blue she had ever seen, and it seemed to draw her in. Ho, how do you know my name? She asked with a noticeable southern accent, twang, as she wondered if the man before her was a customer of her and her family's business. Naruto I smiled at her. I looked you up while you were unconscious. I've passed your shop a few times but never went in. He stated, making her nod before she widened her eyes and tried to sit up. Gramps. Kurt. She shouted, screamed, and began crying as Naruto held her to keep her from moving around too much. I know, I'm sorry. Naruto stated sadly, making her cry harder into his chest. Naruto looked down at the girl and felt for her since her pain was much like his own. The girl was named Cindy Oram. She was a fourth-generation mechanic, and her great-granddad was one of the military's top engineers and mechanics for World War II. Her grandpa Sid was once the head vehicle engineer for Wayne Enterprises before the death of Martha and Thomas Wayne, and left when he decided he didn't like the management that was in charge until Bruce Wayne took over and set up the auto body shop that he ran until his son took over, and then Cindy took over when her father died of cancer. Cindy quickly made a name for herself as the Lex Luthor of mechanics, back when Lex Luthor wasn't considered a bastard by almost every person on the planet, which means prior to Superman becoming a large icon, and kept herself popular with a lot of people. However, this also led to the current situation, as said popularity made her a glaring target for the cartels, and the vehicle bosses of each cartel sent their personal troops to get her, and this led to a bit of a gunfight at the shop and Cindy's only remaining family. Her grandpa Sid and nephew Kurt were gunned down as Kurt was hit in the first few seconds as the cartels shot at each other first, and Sid held them back and told Cindy to run as he shot at them with his trusty shotgun, even took a few with him from what his clones reported. This situation then led her to arriving here after running through alleyways dodging anyone that was looking for her, and then led to here and now. Naruto just held her until she began to calm down before he spoke again. Right now, there's nowhere safe for you unless you fake your death. He stated, making her sniff slightly. However, if you can abide with staying here for a while, then I can remove the 3 men that are primarily after you and you should be safe. He stated, making her look at him with hope and curiosity. Your skills became noticeable to the 3 local cartels and they want your skills, but do not blame yourself. If they hadn't all come at once, then the situation wouldn't have happened, so it is not your fault, especially since you had no way of knowing this would happen. He stated while cupping her face to make her look at him, to emphasize to her that she was not to blame herself for this mess, as it was not her fault and she should never blame it on herself, as her grandfather and nephew surely didn't. Cindy sniffed and cried a bit more before she nodded, though she had a bit of a blush from his hand still on her cheek. Good, now I'll get a second bed later, for now you need rest. I was able to fix most of the injuries you had, but you still need to relax and take it easy. If you get hungry, just let one of the drones around here know and they'll get you something. Also, it should go without saying, but you can't go outside of here, at least not for a while, since I don't want people finding this place and you walking around while they still have eyes everywhere is not a good idea. If you get bored, feel free to look at the cars my guys are taking apart and help or show them a different way to do it. He stated, making her nod slightly and smile at him before she reached for his mask and moved it to the side before kissing his cheek with a blush. Thanks, I don't know how I'll thank y'all, she stated, and Naruto I smiled at her. It's no trouble, it's in my nature to help people, but even more when they are beautiful women like you, he stated, making her blush more. Now just lay back. Once you're done with this IV bag you can have it taken out, and I'll be leaving soon as the sun is going down, and I need to find the people I was planning on hunting as well as learning where the people after you are, he stated, making her nod a little before she lied back again. I'll have some clothes brought to you since your current ones are, well, they are quite revealing, he stated, and Cindy blinked before she looked down to see her jacket in tatters showing her entire bra covered, which admittedly were struggling within the clearly too small bra. Her shorts were scraped and torn slightly showing her matching panties, her boots were cut too, and her hat had a bullet hole through it. All in all, her current outfit left less to the imagination than it originally did, making her blush. It's alright, I didn't have to undress you to check you for wounds, so I haven't seen anything besides what I'm seeing now, he stated, making her feel a little better before she pulled the blanket over her, making him chuckle. I should be back in a couple of hours, you'll be safe here, he stated, rubbing her head softly, making her blush more before she nodded, and he vanished in a swirl of darkness. Cindy relaxed in the bed as she just stared at the ceiling before the exhaustion of everything caught up to her, and she fell asleep, finding the sound of machinery, tools, and work lulling her to sleep. East side of LA, Martinez's complex. 5 minutes later. The complex was in chaos as a very pissed off Naruto was there and was not taking any prisoners. Though Naruto wasn't looking for prisoners, he was too pissed to want prisoners, though that didn't mean he was killing anyone innocent, but those dying were probably wishing they were. Right after Naruto arrived at the complex, several of his leviathans attacked different sentries before he walked in the front entrance and released his swarm of darkness insects, and they happily began latching onto various cartel members and feasted on them, making them panic and scream in pain. Naturally, this made it easy for Naruto to consume their hearts and let the insects have the rest as he climbed the structure while still releasing more insects as he went. He didn't care about the screaming, he didn't care about the sirens he could hear coming from a distance away, and he didn't care about the bullets that were whizzing past him or the few that hit him, as they merely tickled, since the idiots were using low-caliber subpar ammo and they would need to empty the clip at point-blank range to attempt to hurt him. When he reached the roof, he found Martinez huddled in a corner with a noticeable wet spot on his pants and a puddle on the ground. Naruto merely approached him as the bastard begged for mercy before Naruto grabbed him by the throat and dragged him to the edge before he held him over the ledge above the courtyard that was filled with his swarm of insects that were all buzzing for food. Please. Don't drop me, please. I can pay you a lot of money, Martinez begged as he looked down to see the swarm effectively disintegrating the few remaining members of his guards. Naruto just stood there looking impassively. Give me the name of your vehicle expert and his location and I won't kill you painfully, Naruto stated as he let Martinez slip slightly, making him scream like a little girl. You mean Chuko. Rafael Diaz, we call him Chuko. I don't know where he is, I swear. One of the others may, but not me. I just pay the men as they come and the others send their trusted lieutenants to bring them their money, so we're never in the same place together. Martinez stated, and Naruto knew he wasn't lying. Thank you. Naruto stated before a tendril came out and removed Martinez's head while the body fell for the swarm to feed on, and it was gone within seconds before the insect swarmed back to Naruto and began melding with his armor and clothes. Naruto then flexed his hand and a pitch-black rod appeared before he impaled Martinez's head on it and then threw it straight down to the courtyard, where it struck upright just as the cops came in with Snake and Heller leading them. Snake and Heller looked in surprise at seeing Martinez's head there on a pike before having the men fan out and scout the area while noticing plenty of blood, bullet marks, casings, and weapons, but no bodies. Snake then hummed in thought before looking up and raised his eyebrows before nudging Heller, who followed his eyesight to see Naruto standing there. Naruto locked eyes with them before giving them a two-finger salute and vanishing. Snake sighed as Heller looked at him. The methods are extreme, but his results can't be questioned. We'd have never gotten into this place, let alone brought Martinez in long enough to put him on trial. Los Muertos would have had him out in an hour and on the first plane, ship, or anything out of the country before we could even get our bearings straight. I say let him do what he's doing. We saw in Gotham that the Batman's methods don't work, as the people get out eventually and just do it all over again, but we're getting freedom as we go, and he's not only helping out city but he's helping people south of the border, since you know the main branch of the cartel is going to be pissed their money and resources are failing. Heller stated and explained, making Snake grunt before a SWAT officer called them to the third floor. Upon arriving, they found a dozen or so members curled up in the corners and floor. Get them off. Get them away from me. Get them off. They muttered over and over while occasionally swatting at their bodies like something was crawling on them. Beside them on several tables were some stacks of cash, while on others were piles of ashes, showing that not only did they have evidence to take in and the Treasury Department to call, but also that Naruto apparently destroyed a good chunk of cash to hurt the cartel. Damn, if the cartel didn't want him dead before, they sure as hell will now. Heller stated, knowing the cartel loved their money more than they did most everything else, and now that Naruto's burned their cash and caused a large chunk to be taken, they are going to be pissed. Snake nodded before he lit a cigarette and sniffed something before he chuckled and motioned everyone away before he flicked the cigarette at the ground in front of him, causing a trail of fire to go up and burn another table of cash before the fire went up the wall and spelled out something, cage. Snake smirked and got another cig before blowing some smoke out. Get that money into evidence. If it catches fire, then just let it burn. Snake stated, walking out with Heller right beside him as different cops began bagging the evidence. When they entered their car, they both paused as they noticed the note on the dashboard, "Don't get comfortable, more of the bastards are dying tonight." It read, and they both grunted before Snake grabbed the radio. "Control, this is Lieutenant Smith. I need notification on any and all areas with multiple reports of gunfire. The situation here is going to happen again soon," he informed before waiting for a reply. "Roger that, we'll keep you updated," came the reply from the precinct as Snake and Heller decided to drive around and see if they could find their new friend. It wasn't 10 minutes later that the radio came on again. "Detectives, we have multiple reports of gunfire and explosions coming from a nightclub known to be owned and run by a Los Muertos captain named Jose Guerra." The report came, making the two pause slightly since they were nearby. "Roger, Control. Have SWAT and officers form a perimeter. Under no circumstances are they to enter the grounds." Heller reported in his snake floored it towards the club. Jose Guerra's club. 5 minutes ago. Naruto had started off a little more subtle this time, if for old time's sake at least, and sent his leviathans out to begin tearing the gas tanks of the various vehicles and also killing those who were guarding them. Once the tanks were all ruptured, he gave it a few minutes to let all the gasoline pool on the ground while he approached the front. Naruto smirked seeing the various patrols and reached his hand out before several black orbs launched and implanted themselves into the ground before shrinking to mere dots. Naruto grinned before he had a remaining eel breathe black fire onto the gasoline, setting off a massive explosion as the fire lit up all the cars, making several of the cartel panic along with the patrons of the club. Naruto then heard screaming and turned his attention back to the open area in front of the club as different cartel members died as they stepped on the spots, since each orb opened and either had a tendril launch out and impale an enemy, got grabbed by a pair of scaly hands and dragged in, were impaled by a spear point with the tip coming out of their heads, had an eel launch out at their faces, or got set on fire. Naturally, this got witnesses to scream in terror and try to run or attack the things grabbing people, only for Naruto to pull a long-barreled peacemaker that had glowing purple runes etched on it and fired shockwaves that blasted the enemy away or hit them with enough force that it caused them to explode. As he went, he idly had his two connected leviathans, that he called his demon arms, begin eating the hearts and absorbing the darkness from the corpses and the black blobs that had activated. He idly fired at the roof of the club as he sensed a sniper there and enjoyed the shock of the round blasting the concrete cover away and into the sniper as he walked. When he entered the club, his tendrils released and caught several bats, thrown bottles, and other items that were launched at him before he sent them right back, causing damage and chaos. Naruto then raised his hand and several dark portals opened before imps of varying states of dress came out before Naruto flicked his wrist and they cackled with glee before they spread out and began killing their master's enemies and pissing on them too for good measure. These little devils were called Darklings and their attacks ranged from gouging out eyes after jumping on the victim's face, grabbing them and slamming their head into the floor or wall till their head caved in, taking some bottles or other makeshift weapons and carving up or bashing in their victims' faces, and many other painful and tortuous methods of killing, while they also consumed the hearts and the darkness from the enemies, knowing it would be given to their master, furthering his powers. After all, more power and darkness meant more of them and more mayhem on his enemies. As his Darklings enjoyed the carnage, Naruto walked towards where he knew Gaara was. The man stunk of fear, piss, and drugs, even in a place filled with it. The man was Fleer, not a fighter, and it showed a lot since the man had 5 different vehicles on standby just for him to use to get away if the place was attacked or cops came to arrest him. Naruto idly moved his head to the side as a shotgun blast went past him and Naruto shot the individual responsible as he followed Guerra's trail to his private party booth on the top of the club. Naruto idly leaned back as he came out the doorway as a shotgun blast hit right by the door. Naruto leaned out and looked at the wall before looking at Gaara with a raised eyebrow. Really? He asked before a tendril lashed out and sliced the shotgun in half and took a few of Guerra's fingers off doing it. Naruto stared impassively at the cowering form of Gaara as all of his protection was dead, his club was pretty much ruined, his product was on fire, a minion had saw to that by pissing all over it and then lighting it, his cars were destroyed, and all of his customers were fleeing for the hills, and no doubt quite a few were being picked up by the cops he could hear closing in on this place. Naruto approached him and held his gun to Guerra's head. Diaz, where is he? Naruto stated impassively, even as the man shook from fear and slight shock, the medical kind, from the blood loss from his hand basically squirting blood like a sprinkler. If I tell you, will you let me live? Gaara asked while trying to stem the bleeding in his hand as he stared at the demon devil before him. Naruto merely hummed a moment. I won't kill you, provided you don't lie, and I will know if you do. Naruto stated, clicking his revolver, making Gaara shake even more. Okay. He's in the old stadium in the mountains outside of the city. He uses it as a driving course for his wheelmen to practice on. I have to go there to get new vehicles should the police seize one or the other cartels attack one for deliveries. Gaara stated, and Naruto stared at him impassively before he holstered his revolver and walked off, making Gaara sigh in relief before he paled as several of the Darklings came near him, cackling madly. Gaara screamed as the Darklings all dived at him before they began beating and tearing him apart. Naruto popped his neck as he looked around to figure out where to go next before taking off for his next target, who happened to be nearby, as the police arrived and began scouring the grounds with Naruto's Darklings cackling as they disappeared into darkness along with the trap spots Naruto left on the ground. Midtown Bus Depot. It took Naruto less than 5 minutes to reach a building overlooking the depot where Bigorov was located and saw that his little show of things with Cortez made the other cartels a bit nervous, so they beefed up security. Not that it was going to matter at all. None of these goons had the skill, grit, or muscle to remove him from this world, and he doubted any of the metahumans and aliens in the world did either. Back on task though, Naruto saw several snipers on the walkways connecting the depot to another area, most likely originally a resting area for the workers doing an all-nighter, and smirked before he channeled his darkness to his fingers before flicking them. The result was instantaneous as compressed bullet-shaped orbs of darkness launched out and pierced the snipers through their heads, dropping them immediately before he flicked a few more at the support columns of the walkway and at the gate guards. The columns shattered and the walkway crumbled while the guards of the gates dropped dead with holes through their heads. Naruto then smirked and channeled some darkness to his mouth before he spat at the gates with dark webbing now clogging up not only the gates but the gears and mechanisms that worked them. Now everyone inside the depot was trapped there unless they wanted to get through the iron mesh fence they had around the depot to ensure no vehicles could slam through and invade. Naruto then channeled darkness to his hands again before igniting them with fire and launched more bullets out at the tankers, trucks, and armored plated vehicles, with each bullet piercing the fuel tanks, causing them to explode, taking out more cartel members and making several panic before Naruto called his Darklings to within the walls and they swarmed the place. Only now there were some with WW1 style equipment and plenty of grenades, and they were going explosive happy, while others had flintlock pistols and were shooting the place up, since after firing, they just spat down the barrel before firing again. When Bigorov made a run for it in an armored military ATV, Naruto struck by sending a tendril through the windshield, impaling Bigorov through the chest and yanked him out of the vehicle and up to Naruto while he stared impassively at the meathead as blood flowed from his mouth. Guess you won't be going after Cindy again, he stated, making the man's eyes widen before the tendril tore his heart out and consumed it before throwing him back into the depot for everyone to find as the Darklings broke the webbing for the incoming cops before dispersing. Naruto rolled his shoulders, gaining the satisfying pops. 3 down, 3 to go, then I need to focus on those other 2 vehicle experts. Naruto muttered to himself before chuckling, knowing that his little war was going to cause a lot of paperwork for the cops. Ah well, they'll get over it since crime will be drastically cut down. He mused to himself before he disappeared in a swirl of darkness again as more cops showed up. Near the port of Los Angeles, Naruto reappeared across town to the industrial area where Jariv was holed up, from what he learned from a Volk lackey that was sent after Cindy. Apparently, the man was even more paranoid than Naruto was first informed, since he not only beefed up security, but now he wasn't even leaving the central building of the refinement plant unless he had a full security detail and Vladimir himself wanted to see him or Jariv was leaving the country on business. However, one fatal flaw was that there were several flow pipes connected to the building as it was transferred from the tanks to the building where it was processed, contained, and then shipped out. Naturally, Naruto intended to cause those pipes to explode. Now, before you freak out about the whole place being a large bomb, at the halfway point of the junctions between the central buildings and the containers there was a shut-off terminal, basically a high-tech pop-off valve that also acted as containment if a fire got into the pipes. The terminal immediately locked down clamps, valves, and blockers to keep the fire from ever reaching the large tankers. What you are probably thinking is correct. Cheap fuel but state-of-the-art protection from fire since the fuel burns easily and violently so. Naruto idly mused it was a liquid and dangerous version of flash paper. Naruto smirked before he released leviathans and insects on the refinery, not the swarm of last time, but enough to get his next objective done. Naruto watched as the bugs landed on the different grunts while the leviathans latched onto the piping near the terminals. In the words of that one psychopath, art is an explosion. Naruto stated with a grin as the insects glowed before exploding, taking the grunts with them for the most part before the leviathans began exploding on the pipes, causing the piping leading to the central building to start exploding, and Naruto saw Jariv taking an express elevator to the roof to escape the fumes and fire. Naruto smirked before he went to the top of the building and waited while a few more insects flew around, latching onto different grunts that were panicking and killing them. A minute or so later, the elevator doors opened and 5 grunts came out and looked around cautiously before a tendril whipped by and took all their heads off, making them fall to the ground. Naruto then launched the tendril into the elevator, hearing the satisfying scream of pain as the tendril came back with Jariv impaled on it. Naruto merely had one of his demon arms come out and consume the darkness and heart before he tossed the body off the building. Naruto then jumped down, causing a small crater before he grabbed several bodies and positioned them to be pointing at a cover for the drainage system that Naruto could see was holding several crates of weapons. He then materialized some rope and tossed it over the piping before stringing up Jariv, and then made both his arms point down at the cover after shocking them with some low-level lightning to lock the muscles up. Naruto nodded to himself before seeing a few cop cars pulled to the gates and he waved at them before vanishing. Business District. Naruto appeared atop a building a short ways from the expo center when he paused as a clone popped. Apparently Cindy had woken up and put on the new clothes a clone got her and, rather than trying to get some more sleep, decided to join his clones in dismantling the vehicles he had confiscated. Naruto understood. Work of any kind would take her mind off of things and allow her to deal with it at her own pace rather than just letting the floodgates open and possibly break down. Naruto shook those thoughts away and looked to the expo center, seeing only one normal entrance in with the rest of the building having guards at each other possible point of entry, not that they'd be a problem. He also sensed several armed guards focused around the main entrance, the inner control room, and the inner corridors to the inner control room. Naruto also could see that the glass in the vital areas was DARPA engineered to be most bullet and explosive proof, meaning something around an armor-piercing anti-tank round or a Predator missile to get close to puncturing the glass, or at least that would be the case if Naruto was a conventional or normal person. However, he figured why disappoint his enemies as they had prepared such a wonderful welcome for him and it would be rude to not just enter through the front door. With that in mind, he dropped to the ground and walked casually to the entrance before a swirl of darkness appeared in front of him and blocked the bullets that began to fly at him. Once the gunfire stopped, Naruto unleashed a tentacle and it grabbed a grenade thrown at him before it quickly threw it back, making the grunts panic before they were consumed by the explosion. Naruto merely walked forward, letting several of his darklings appear and charge in with reckless glee, enjoying the sounds of gunfire and screaming as the darklings entertained themselves in very cruel and brutal ways. It was almost worth pitying the cartel members, since Naruto had given his darklings their own version of the darkness armor, which he now used for clothes and armor when out and about, and now they were much harder to kill than they were ages ago. Naruto shook those thoughts away as he walked to the control room of the expo center as the darklings played with their victims in various methods of torture, including grabbing a limb each and seeing which would tear off first, seeing which head is squishier by jumping on the head repeatedly while the person was still alive, pissing all over them before setting them on fire, and other unique ways of them getting their sadistic glee. Naruto then approached a pair of heavy steel doors before his two demon arms grabbed hold of the doors and began crushing them before tearing them off the hinges. Naruto then caught a rocket that was fired at him before throwing it back, killing the rocketeer as he entered the hallway and began slowly going up as his demon arms tore everyone in his way apart, while some of the free-moving leviathans consumed the dark essence and hearts of the various corpses. Once Naruto reached the control room, he kicked the doors in, crushing a few enemies before his tendrils lashed out and began skewering, dismembering, and splitting the enemies into pieces as the bullets merely impacted his clothes and were absorbed. After 2 minutes of carnage, there was silence as Naruto turned his attention to Thaddeus Oakley, who looked to be in need of a new pair of pants, and wrapped one of his tendrils around his neck before pulling him down from a walkway above Naruto. Before he could try and beg for his life, Naruto snapped his neck before pinning his body to the wall. Flexing his hands, black rods appeared in them and he put Thaddeus's corpse into a crucified position before pinning him to the wall through his hands, feet, and head before his demonic arms ate the essence and heart. Naruto then went to the main controls and promptly destroyed all files on how to influence people and turn them into drones for you that Thaddeus had perfected before taking some of the extra research data in case there was something useful within. As he was heading out, his darklings brought him some documents on a Los Muertos member named Rodrigo Montana Alvarez and Volk member named Natalia Grizunova. Naruto frowned before sealing the documents away and left the expo center while the darklings all cackled as they disappeared into darkness. Naruto left the expo center and quickly sunk into the shadows as more police came, including some more members of SWAT, since the police were being spread thin due to his actions over the course of the night. It wasn't that surprising. 5 mass casualty crime scenes to secure, gather evidence, secure bodies, and more in one night was a bit much for any city police to handle. Naruto almost felt bad having to add one more to the pile, but he wasn't going to give Shigen the chance to use their security for even more time, since that was just asking for more headaches, so Fang Yin was dying that night. Just outside Los Angeles, Naruto sighed as he came out of a shadow of tree near the road leading to the security center Shigeneral set up for Fang Yin, and immediately could sense snipers, fire teams, rocket crews, and more positioned throughout the area to observe the road and destroy anyone that was deemed unauthorized to be near the center. He merely rolled his eyes. Clearly the company didn't think any of the heroes of the world would try anything in the city if they came. Then again, they did have a dedicated unit of their company designed for making sure no one knew how many dark dealings and skeletons they had. Though he knew the likes of Batman could easily find them, but that wasn't their concern now. It was his. Naruto quickly marked each enemy with his hidden eye, making it impossible for them to hide from him or his other talents, which was why he released dozens of leviathans and they quickly sunk into the shadows and rushed after the enemies. Naruto smirked before he called several of his darklings with each having double-barreled flintlocks and granados, and they cackled as they charged for the main gates of the center, drawing the enemy's attention before his leviathans lashed out and caused screaming and mayhem as some were eaten, ripped apart, set on fire, had acid spat on their faces, or were blown up. Naruto merely walked up behind his darklings as several were lobbing granados at the walls and gates, damaging them since they weren't normal ones and the gates were weakening. Naruto merely leapt up the wall and threw a few of the defenders off, letting gravity do his work for him as he walked along the wall towards the back area of the main building. As Naruto reached the back of the center, the gates exploded inward and the darklings rushed in, drawing more of the defenders away from the main building. Said building was a large glass dome that he could see had dozens if not hundreds of monitors and people looking over each of them, while Fang Yin was standing on an elevated platform with a large monitor before her. Naruto smirked before he hooked a tendril on the wall and jumped off the edge away from the facility, making the tendril stretch before it recoiled and launched him at the dome, causing him to smash through the glass. Naturally, the monitoring people were in shock as that happened before Naruto quickly lashed out with his tendrils, killing several of them and making the rest panic and run for their lives, only to run into his horde of darklings that had broken through the defenses and were now attacking them. Naruto then looked at Fang Yin and jumped to her platform. She looked pissed that he was here, as if she was some godlike being and he was unworthy of being in her presence. Naturally, this annoyed Naruto, and before she could speak, his demon arms lashed out and tore her in half before taking her heart. Naruto rolled his eyes and went to her monitor before he inserted a flash drive into it and began copying all her files and documentations to it for him to look over, knowing there would be files on the different leaders' movements as well as anything else that could be useful to him or the police. Once the information was copied, he took his flash drive before sending a large file to Snake and Heller and then uploaded a virus that destroyed the system and erased all records of his movements and anything on Cindy. Once he was done, he pulled a cell phone out and dialed 911. 911, what is your emergency? A woman stated over the line. Sergeant Heller or Lieutenant Smith, please. Naruto stated as he sat in a chair and relaxed as his minions fanned out and tied up anyone that didn't deserve to die while killing any that did. It was a minute or so later that Heller came on the line. This is Heller, who is this? He asked, demanded. Naruto smirked. Take a guess. Naruto stated, hearing a grunt on the line. You and Snake need to check your personal email, make sure you're sitting down when you do. You also should send some people to the large observation unit that Shy General Corporation built, make sure you alert the coroner. Naruto stated before hanging up the phone and leaving the area with his darklings dispersing when they were done with their work. Back at Naruto's base, Naruto returned to his base and sighed as he changed his clothing to a wife beater and a pair of sweatpants before he looked and saw Cindy curled up on the couch asleep, dressed in a new red jacket that accentuated her bust since she still left it most of the way undone, pair of denim short shorts, and a pair of black-heeled boots that reached her midcalf. Chuckling slightly, Naruto lifted her and set her on the bed before she pulled him down with her before she snuggled into his chest with a smile. Comfy. She mumbled and Naruto merely shrugged before getting comfortable and going to sleep.